My name is Paul Grantham with Communication Services, and I'll be helping to moderate this discussion tonight. So welcome to this Climate Forum. We're here to talk about the efforts that have been made around sustainability and to meet our climate action plan, as well as biogas as a potential renewable fuel for Duke and its energy needs. Format tonight, we have a number of our Duke experts here in various areas, and I will introduce them here in a second. But we will break at different segments, so each one of them will be talking on different issues tonight, and we will be taking a break after certain portions to allow you to ask questions and engage with us on this topic. And so we will go through, I think after we get through the energy portion, we will stop, and after we get through the biogas section, we will stop, and then we'll have an opportunity towards the end of the event as well for you to ask questions and provide us feedback on this process. So I just want to set the stage for that. If you ask questions about biogas, and we haven't gotten to that yet, we'll respectfully ask to hold that question until we've engaged in that topic and talked about it, and then we will come back to that. Let me first introduce our panelists. We have four. You can't see the last one. He's had to take a phone call. But we have Tavy Capps, who is our Director of Sustainability here at Duke. We have Casey Collins, who's the Facilities Management Energy Manager. Tanya Voigt, who is our Director of Biogas Strategy. And joining us soon will be Tim Profeta, who is the Director of the Nicholas School of Environmental Policy Solutions and also the co-chair for the Campus Sustainability Committee. But before we start, I'd like to turn it over to our Executive Vice President, Dr. Tolman Trask, to say a few words about our most recent announcement on Friday about our plans to indefinitely kind of suspend the combined heat and power plant. That proposal had been made about a year ago. So, Tolman?
I too thank you all for coming. We know there's a lot of interest in where we're headed. Actually, we thought there was more interest than is here tonight. But we're going to have meetings like this from time to time and provide other opportunities for people to comment as we move through this process. But I want to start with three general observations. I want to be clear about what happened on Friday. There were a lot of rumors floating around that we were about to go to the trustees in May to seek permission to build a power plant. We were not, and we are not. That decision's on indefinite hold for one very simple reason. Last year, the committee that Tim Profeta chaired suggested if we were going to pursue that, we should fire it with biomethane. We have worked on that all year. We took that charge seriously. And while there is, I think, a lot of evidence that biomethane at scale is about to become available in North Carolina, a project we've been working on for a decade, it is not yet there. Well, we have an agreement in principle as to how it would work. We do not yet have a signed contract, and I don't want to go to the trustees without a guaranteed source of biomethane. I remain optimistic we could have that contract by the end of 2018, but there are a lot of moving parts. I also want to try to change the conversation about where Duke is headed from a discussion about whether one particular project is a good idea or not, and talk more broadly about where Duke is headed in its energy future over the next several decades. So we're going to step back. That'll involve bringing some outside experts in because it's not about a CHP plant. It's about our commitment to become climate neutral by 2024 and remain climate neutral thereafter. To do that, it's going to involve multiple technologies. It's going to involve conservation. It's going to involve years of collective work. And so we're going to back off a little bit from a plant-by-plant discussion and talk about where we headed in the long run. We remain committed to 2024. The simple fact of the matter is, because of the way we count, largely because we count personal transportation in the totals, it's going to be very hard for us to get there without making at least one more big move. We made the big move when we got off coal, which I think everyone agreed at the time was the right step to make. But we're going to have to make one more big move if we're going to get carbon neutrality by 2024. And so we'll have this forum, we'll have more discussions, probably beginning next fall, once we know more about where we think we're headed, and we hope you'll come to those.
Thank you, Tom. And welcome everyone again. Thank you for taking time after hours to learn more about Duke's sustainability efforts. Before we get too far into the details of the Climate Action Plan and our emission reductions, I want to take a step back and make sure we all understood why we're even having these conversations, why an institution like Duke cares about climate change, and how we're educating our students on campus about this important topic. And I think it's necessary to think about how sustainability is really part of the fabric of this institution before we started using that word. Duke is a university in the forest. We have conserved over 7,000 acres of forested lands surrounding this campus for research and teaching and community benefit and environmental benefit. And really the trees on this campus are part of what makes it Duke and what makes this place so special. I've been here for 12 years, and I have heard the phrase that we think about knowledge and service society often on campus, not just teaching students behind closed doors about the theory of working on complex problems, but actually having them delve into those problems and really think about the complexities, how society and the environment and economy intersect and impact each other. And there isn't always the perfect right answer. You have to think about the topic and what the trade-offs are depending on what you're trying to maximize. We're looking at it from what we're teaching students at the Marine Lab, huge issues like how are we going to preserve the Earth's oceans. We're thinking about this in cutting-edge cancer research here in the Medical Center, how human health and the environment are interacting, and we are changing that environment every day, but we're also being changed by it ourselves. We're thinking about this, and this is what sustainability is. This is about the choices that we make and how they impact the things that matter to us. And we don't want to just do that in what we're teaching students or the research on campus, but really to be an example of that as an institution and really thinking about this for how we operate the campus. So one way that we have started to do that is the climate commitment that Tom had mentioned. In 2007, we signed the American College and University President's Climate Commitment that said we'd come up with a plan to be climate neutral. We would pledge and make a commitment that we'd figure that out. And not in 50 years or 60 years, but as soon as possible, and really think about how we can make change now. We took 2 years with the Campus Sustainability Committee of faculty, staff, and students to talk through this and think about what strategies we could employ to get emissions down on campus. We wanted to focus first on campus with reductions and really think about what we could do before we talked about offsets, but knew that offsets were going to be a part of the equation and wanted those to be real, tangible offsets that had co-benefits to our community. And the reason we made this commitment is not just for carbon emissions. It's about leadership. It's about the campus, like Duke and campuses, our peer institutions, having a unique opportunity to deal with these issues and how we operate our campus and how we educate our students, to be a model for others and really thinking through these complex issues in ways that a lot of other institutions don't necessarily have the opportunity to do. It's not just about Duke's environmental footprint. It's about our impact on the community and Durham and our state and our world and the students that are graduating from here that will be the future leaders and teachers and policymakers, that we're ensuring that they understand how to think through the lens of sustainability. We want this to be part of the culture of campus. We want students and faculty and staff to feel connected to our sustainability goals and also accountable. You know, Duke has a footprint because we're all here. And how do we encourage and empower people to think about how they can make change too? And it's about efficient use of resources, environmental resources, but also financial resources, which aren't unlimited. We want to meet our sustainability goals in the most fiscally responsible way we can, and really have been trying to do that with the Climate Action Plan. And we've been making progress. We've been able to reduce emissions 24% on campus over the past decade. We've been able to invest in energy efficiency and other measures to really see the emissions go down. And we're on track to where we thought we would be in 2018, but we know we still have a far ways to go to get to zero. Looking more closely at where we've been able to make reductions, we've definitely had the most impact on the energy side. We've been able to work on getting off of coal in the campus steam plants, energy efficiency in our buildings, from nighttime setbacks for heating and cooling to tweaking the systems to run more efficiently, making our steam system as efficient as possible so we really can drive down the emissions that we have more operational control over. And also thinking about the strategies that we don't have as much control. Thelma mentioned transportation. It's very hard to change people's day-to-day choices of how they get to campus, whether or not they travel to a conference by plane. We count employee commuting, air travel, and fleet in our transportation emissions. We want to see those go down as well, but have been much harder emissions to impact. We've seen steam plant emissions come down 41% and electricity emissions come down 33%. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop. We're going to continue to drive those emissions down. I should also note that we have expanded our emissions inventory methodology. We heard concerns last year when we were talking about combined heat and power and methane leakage from natural gas. We've added those emissions into our inventory, that any natural gas burned on campus, we are counting those fugitive emissions from natural gas production. And we've been really talking about how we update the Climate Action Plan over the past year and a half with the Campus Sustainability Committee, knowing that a lot has changed. We wrote this plan in 2009. We thought there was going to be cap and trade. We had projections from Duke Energy of what their carbon emissions would be of their electricity fleet. Things have changed drastically, and we want to also think about new technologies and technologies that weren't necessarily on the table 10 years ago, how we can include those in our plan and push even further than we thought we could on campus and beyond. And we want to keep thinking about transportation. There's new technologies that make it easier for people to make daily choices of how they come to campus. We're thinking about more efficient buses and cleaner bus systems for our fleet, and also thinking about regional transportation. You know, we have an opportunity to expand regional transportation in this area and want to be a voice at the table, thinking about how we make that work for the Triangle and for the Duke community. So this is where we are. We've made significant reductions, but we know we can do more. We can push further. We can continue to invest in energy efficiency and renewables and alternative transportation. But we will meet our 2024 goal, and we want to talk tonight about some of the details and the impact that can have on campus, in our community, and for our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Tavy. As was noted in the introduction, my name is Casey Collins. I'm the energy manager for the university. I'm here to share some of the details about the scope and size and technologies that we consider in the operation of campus. Just to add a little more clarity to the discussion about how we serve the energy needs of a very large campus that on any given day serves between 30 and 50,000 people. We're a small city in that regard. And so the number on the screen, which is, to be honest, a little bit abstract, 3.1 times 10 to the 12th BTU, which is a British thermal unit of energy, is not so tangible to you and me and everyone that deals with that. But what that really means is that Duke uses per annum somewhere on the order of the amount of energy that would be required to serve about 34,000 typical North Carolina homes. And we have a university that is research intensive. We have a lot of technologies in our buildings that you wouldn't necessarily find in other settings. And so, with this size and scale, it takes a lot of energy and water to execute our primary mission. All the more reason for us to be responsible with both our supply and demand management of those resources. So we recognize that it's a significant asset, and one that's certainly worth managing. The interesting thing about Duke is that if you look at the source energy that comes into campus, it's almost a 50-50 split between electricity and natural gas. Why, you ask? Given North Carolina's climate, predominantly, we use electricity for the things that are obvious, our lighting, all the things that we plug in every day, and all the things that will be plugged in the future the next time somebody invents a new gadget. But we use our both our energy sources year round, particularly on the natural gas side, for much tighter control and process uses for our very research intense campus. And so that's not just space heating in the winter, but that's humidification or dehumidification. It's hot water generation, all the hand washing for domestic hot water and things like that. And then particularly crucial to our medical campus, the need to sterilize and run all the operations that are necessary for the healthcare environment. So with that in mind, there are certain technologies that work for our campus and certain technologies that don't. And again, just to give you a little more sense of scale, we've got about 20 million square feet on this campus, and that has grown. Obviously, everyone, at least I think in the community, and certainly those that are on campus every day, have noticed the construction cranes. So, and that's 327 facilities that rely on a 24/7 uninterrupted energy services to execute their primary mission of all the activities that happen here every day. So we have been doing, as Tavy noted, a significant amount of work, certainly since the Climate Action Plan, but even before that, in managing our energy resources. Over the past 10 years, as is noted up there, Duke has grown on the order of 20% in terms of its physical footprint. We have, in that same time frame, been able to limit the energy use or the energy growth by only 1%. And so this has been through a mix of technologies to manage both the supply and the demand of energy, to make sure that as we build new buildings, each next facility is more energy efficient. We take our old facilities, we retrofit them so that they can be more energy efficient. Excuse me. And that happens both at the building scale and then at the utility scale, outside the bounds of the building, as we are able to serve this energy to this campus. So we look forward to continuing this progress. And again, this is a portfolio approach that I think has gotten us to where we are today, and a portfolio approach that will help us in the future. I'll touch on. There we go. I'll touch on our consideration of solar. To mention a couple things. One, I think especially in North Carolina, which gets a lot of press for being, sort of the number 2 solar state in the nation now, behind California, in terms of capacity. The things that we're allowed to do from a policy perspective, from a regulatory and legal perspective, with solar are very different than some of our other peer institutions. So the short answer is, if we could get more solar energy, we would take it. And in fact, we could take almost all the solar energy that you could get. There's a fair amount of regulatory and policy barriers that prevent us from doing that, and we hope to see some changes that stemmed out of last year's passage of House Bill 589, for which there will be a creation of some new renewable energy tariff programs, but those are still under consideration by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So, in the absence of a clear policy path forward that would allow the development of utility-scale solar power to be delivered directly to the university, we are exploring as many on-campus options as we can. A couple of our facilities right now actually house solar PV on the rooftops. We're in the middle of construction as we speak, putting solar PV on top of parking garage 9. But again, thinking back to our first slide on just the quantity of energy that we require, if we were to go out and cover every single rooftop that was feasibly available for solar power, we would be able to supply ourselves probably less than 4% of our annual energy needs, right? And that would have a carbon reduction impact, unfortunately, of not as great as we want. So the short answer on solar is that yes, we want some, but we'd like to do it more, and we look forward to the changes that might come out of this new policy development. So I'll transition just to say that, you know, solar PV, solar electricity, is the most visible and I guess the most tangible resource that people think about when they think about renewables, but it's certainly not the only renewable resource, and we're going to hear from Tanya in a little bit about another option. So with that being said, we consider this an all of the above a strategy for what we need to do to get to greenhouse gas neutrality and how to reduce the carbon footprint of our facilities. We'll do that through emissions reductions in our energy supply. We'll do that through emissions reductions in energy efficiency, and again, we'll be building more efficient buildings. We'll be developing more internal policies to make sure that new construction is more efficient, and we'll continue to tune up our old buildings. We have 100 years of history almost now of the built environment in this little corner of Durham, and so we'll keep working on it. To conclude, I guess I'd say, as Dr. Trask noted in his remarks, we will further develop a more comprehensive energy plan that considers all of these strategies, and we look forward to seeing how that develops and taking feedback. So, thank you.
Thank you, Casey. We're going to take a break here and ask if there are any questions, any comments specific to the Climate Action Plan, things that we've done to date, or any questions or feedback regarding Duke's energy profile. We have 2 microphones located at either aisle here, and I would just ask if you could, for the sake of everyone here and others, we are video recording this as well, to hear if you'd come up and just tell us your name, your affiliation with Duke, and ask your question or provide feedback. We also solicited questions in advance and asked people if they had questions. We had a number of responses. So I thought I'd start maybe by asking one of the questions that was submitted in advance. And Casey, this kind of gets to some of the things you were speaking of just now. This question was submitted by Caroline Heitman, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Could energy efficiency or solar potentially offset or negate the need for other measures? Duke Tolman mentioned earlier about other big moves like biogas, and so I guess could other incremental changes to energy efficiency or solar or things like that help to replace some of those other big moves?
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Is Caroline in the audience tonight? Oh, hey, Caroline. All right. Thank you for your question. There we go. That's better. So the short answer is that while energy efficiency will make incremental changes, and energy efficiency is always a very good and, in fact, the first thing we try to implement when we look at greenhouse gas reductions, there are the way that Duke uses its campus and the way that people use buildings and the things that people want to do in those buildings will always require some energy. And so we think that some major energy efficiency moves over the next 5 years or so might reduce our greenhouse gas footprint by another 10%, maybe 11%. The short answer is no, that can't replace perhaps some other large moves on the supply side of the equation.
Any other questions related to Duke's past efforts around climate action or around our energy profile?
Hey, I'm Elizabeth Oots. I'm a reporter with Southeast Energy News. And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to ask, so you can punt me if necessary. But I've heard a lot of concern about the energy plan moving forward and how transparent that will be and how it will involve folks both within the campus community but the larger community as well. And I wondered if you could talk about that.
I guess I'd say yes. I believe Tim's going to touch on that at the end, some of that stakeholder process. But yes, in short, we recognize the need for greater transparency. And I think you'll hear in a little bit more about how that's going to move going forward.
Hi, Seaver Wang, fourth year PhD candidate, Division of Earth and Ocean Sciences. So I'm aware, obviously, there's some administrative separation between Duke University and Duke Hospital, but I was wondering if you guys might be able to speak a little bit as to whether or not the hospital is also considering measures to reduce its carbon footprint, or even the adoption of a plan of its own.
So we don't currently include the hospital in our overall climate action plan. And in part, that was deliberate back when we first made the commitment to be comparable to other peer institutions and focus on the places, the campus, the School of Medicine, School of Nursing, where we thought we could make significant reductions. I know that Jean Washington, the Chancellor of Health Affairs, is very interested in health and wellness and energy efficiency and other aspects of sustainability. We haven't talked specifically about if they would be included in our plan, but I think a lot of the utility upgrades that we would do on campus serve the hospital as well. Our systems are completely intertwined. And they also have a slightly separate facilities department, but are always looking for the energy efficiency reductions they can do to save resources. I don't know if you have any specifics to add.
No, Tavi's correct. On the supply side, anything that we do that affects the university also affects the health system, the hospital itself. And so we will, by default, by making energy efficiency gains, carbon reduction gains in our energy supply, help them as well.
But I guess at the moment, there's no organized initiatives to try and reduce energy demand on the hospital side at the moment.
I mean, I would say their facilities group, engineering and operations, is always looking at ways that they can reduce resource use, financial resources or energy efficiency. It's not included in our climate action plan strategy, but that's not to say that they aren't working hard on that as well.
Thank you.
So just to clarify for that one, the steam and electricity that the hospital uses, those are currently provided through, Casey, the facilities management department and the work you guys do?
That's correct, Paul.
I'm Ariani Chalapali, an undergraduate sophomore, and I was just interested in knowing, is there a timeline for when an updated climate action plan will be released or formally released?
Our goal this year was to finalize the transportation portion of the climate action plan and put together a more detailed update of what we worked on last year around energy and transportation. I think we will probably still do portions of that this summer. But as you heard from Tallman, we want to think kind of even bigger picture on the energy pieces of this. So I foresee that going into the school year next year and just being additional to the work that we've already done to date.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kat Horvath. I'm a first-year PhD student in electrical engineering. And good thing you brought up transportation, because specifically I'm curious to know what additional steps you have in mind to improve getting to and from campus. As a grad student, I drive every day. I park 15 minutes away from my building, and sometimes I get a bus, sometimes I walk. So if we could somehow solve, multiple facets of this problem, that would be wonderful.
I agree. And as I said, this has definitely been a challenge for the university and I think our region. We're actually working with a master's student from the Nick School this year on kind of delving more into the commuting part of our transportation plan and thinking about, are there technologies that students and staff could utilize to find carpool partners, or not necessarily making a one-time choice to purchase a parking permit, but have an opportunity to make that be a monthly choice or a daily choice. So it's more flexible for people that don't necessarily need to drive every day. I think also working with regional partners, Triangle Transit Authority and the other regional transportation groups, and trying to think about how we can work with them to better serve the Duke community and the Triangle region. I think one of the challenges is so different depending on people's situations. So trying to think about multiple options that can work for different people and not just necessarily putting all of our eggs in one basket. So.
Have you guys explored at all doing some sort of a park and ride scenario where you might have a parking lot off campus, maybe more in RTP or Raleigh, Chapel Hill, and have a bus that just goes to and from that location?
I know in previous years, Parking and Transportation has talked about different park and ride options, Chapel Hill area, closer to the airport. Honestly, not sure where those conversations are right now, but I know it's still part of how do we try to cut down on commuting miles, knowing that people are not only choosing to drive more, but they're living further and further away from campus. So really trying to think about multiple options to get people out of those vehicles.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm happy to talk more if you want to be involved.
Hi, my name's Dave Rogers. I'm a neighbor, and then full transparency, I also run the Sierra Clubs Beyond Coal campaign here in North Carolina. I have a couple questions. One is, you mentioned, I think you were referring to 589 when you talked about some of the changes in the state. I think you've probably looked into this. You're going to be disappointed in kind of the programs, at least as they've been submitted to the Utilities Commission by Duke. So I was wondering if the university has any plans to intervene or advocate inside that regulatory community in order to actually improve those programs?
Yep. Thanks, Dave. The short answer is yes. We've followed that, both the bill and then obviously as a large customer of the utility, their proposed implementation. We, as you noted, share some disappointments. The university just a couple weeks ago filed a joint letter of support with the Utilities Commission. It was us, Davidson, and Wake Forest, requesting changes
to the Green
program.
Source Rider.
To the proposed Green Source Advantage program. You are correct. Yeah, but we are optimistic that in the end of those proceedings, that there will be some workable program. We certainly hope there is, and we hope to be able to take advantage of it.
And then, somewhat unrelated, but another question on the transit front. I was wondering if Duke is exploring any kind of creative partnerships around electrifying transit on the community, like electric buses and things. I know it's a natural kind of relationship with the utility where you can split some of those costs and gain some of the benefits. They get more load, and customers, y'all get cleaner transportation. So I was wondering if any of those conversations have happened or that's in part of the plan at all.
We are actually actively looking at electric buses and bringing those to campus in the next few years, and also thinking about how we provide better EV capacity for campus users. Part of what the student has been working on is looking at our campus fleet in terms of the cars that we drive as staff and employees, and what that looks like, and where there's opportunities to provide incentives or maybe programs for people to change over to EV, but we know we need to have that capacity on campus to support it as well.
Cool, thanks.
Hey, wow. Eric Smith, MBA, Master of Forestry. So Tavy, you kind of give us the landscape of what has happened the past 10 years. And so I've seen a 24% reduction, heard another potential 10% reduction from energy efficiency. But Tim, am I getting to the punchline here? How are we getting the rest of the way there?
I think let's wait for the punchline.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Any other questions? We do have some more substantive content to come, so.
Do you want?
Sure.
Jennifer Marr from the law school, just to quote back, internal policies will be developed. Who's doing that? That was passive voice, good use. Who's doing the internal policy development?
You mean of the plans?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
I think it would be the campus staff, the sustainability staff, energy staff, but then also the campus sustainability committee. We would work through that same avenue that we have in the past to have the staff that it would be implementing the plans working mostly on it, but having students and faculty and staff advising on that process as well.
Called to mind the great programs on Bass Connections that are going through the campus right now, where students are engaged and faculty are engaged in solving big problems. And it seems to me this is a wonderful learning opportunity for students to make sure that all of these graduate and professional students, as well as undergraduates, people with MBA, people with environment, people with engineering, are all engaged. And I'm hoping that that makes up the composition of your committee, and they're not given a small role, but they're given think big. Let's figure this out.
And absolutely. I mean, I think the committee is working on it, but we have had Bass Connection projects looking at carbon pricing, and could we do anaerobic digesting on campus with food waste and lots of different topics that play into our overall climate goals and want to see that expand, including the master's projects that we have looking at very specific aspects of the plan.
Yeah, I think when you think about what we are as a community, we're more than just most efficient, even energy efficient. We are a teaching community, and
Absolutely.
that's part of the goal of this. So thanks.
I will add that one goal in our climate action plan is all students graduate with a knowledge of sustainability and climate action. So we are actively working on how we engage on that as well.
Very good questions. We appreciate it. We have another one? Okay. And then we'll move on to our discussion of biogas. Tanya.
Thank you. My name is Emily Wilkins. I'm a member of the community, not of Duke. And I just want to thank you for putting on hold the move to put the gas generating facility that Duke Energy was trying to sell you and was trying to put on our backs to help fund. So I really appreciate that there's an effort to rethink that. I was also heartened by the suggestion that there would be a biogas plant at some point. I understand that I came in late. I parked over in the medical pavilion by mistake, so it took a little while to get over here. Solar is only one of the many options, and I also appreciate the goal of becoming sustainable by 2024, and I want to know in what way the community members, such as myself, can encourage you to do the right thing by the outside of Duke community as we try to get the Durham City Council to pass resolutions to also work toward sustainability. I think there are plenty of buildings in Durham that have flat roofs that are solar equipped or solar available. And so we've got lots of opportunities within Durham, not just on the Duke campus. So I want you to think of that public-private partnership as you go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I tell you, if we could hold that, because we do want to get to this, and we'll come back to you when we break for the next time after Tanya presents on biogas. We will come back. You'll be first up for questions. All right, Tanya?
Stand up.
Hello, I'm Tanya Voigt. I'm the Director of Biogas Strategy, and I have been an employee of Duke on and off for the past 24 years. So I know I don't look it, but anyway, you guys are supposed to laugh. So I wanted to talk to you today about biogas. So I guess I'm kind of the punchline. Because I think there's a big opportunity in terms of that last delta that we need to reach to do it through biogas and reductions by addressing the methane that's coming off of swine farms in eastern North Carolina. And that's a big part of this discussion because we're doing all we can do. And now we've got an opportunity to take greenhouse gases that are coming off of our farms in the state and put it to good use and to mitigate those emissions. So what I really want to talk about, let's see, and I'll take questions later, is more about our journey on biogas, because we've been working on biogas for quite a long time. I mean, since 2007 and when the university made the climate commitment, it knew that it wasn't going to get to zero without looking elsewhere. And that's what carbon offsets do. And you want to be really careful about the carbon offsets you get, because you want to make sure that when you're going out and trying to get others to make emission reductions, you want to be sure that those emission reductions are real and they're permanent. And in Duke University's case, we wanted to make sure that they were going to benefit North Carolina. And it was quite obvious that the place to look was Eastern North Carolina and our hog farms in the state. And also, no small thing is trying to put farms on a path to improved waste management. So, what we're doing is I think we consider a big step forward towards improved waste management overall, improving the environment in Eastern North Carolina, and I hope improving things for communities in Eastern North Carolina. So why biogas and why did we embark on this? I'm going to fall off the stage here. So I'd rather do this. Okay. One of the reasons that methane coming off a hog farm, and I'm using hog farm, there's a lot of other ways that methane is produced and goes up into the atmosphere. But in North Carolina, our biggest source is from the agricultural sector and from hog farms. And so what happens is on a hog farm, the methane's coming off the lagoon, and that methane is 34 times more potent than carbon dioxide just by destroying that methane. So if you were to take that methane, capture it, and flare it, which means simply burning it, you would turn that into CO2 and reduce its potency. Right there, that's a carbon offset. And we could go to farms right now, capture the methane, and say, we want to get a reduction just for destroying that methane. However, what's so attractive is this dual dividend idea, where you can not just destroy the methane, but make something valuable in its destruction. And by that I mean to make electricity, to make a fuel out of the methane that you're capturing. So there is where your double dividend comes from. So when we embarked on this back in 2007, the point was to figure out, how do you go about getting not only carbon offsets, but generating renewable energy from methane, and in the process being hopeful that we'd be putting farms on a better waste management pathway. I promised I would not go through this timeline, and I won't. I just want to really highlight, we've got you guys can't see the pointer. I can't see the pointer. I want to highlight some things that kind of take you through what I think is a journey that we've been on, from going from looking at methane reductions as a carbon offset for the university to methane and biogas as a way to actually power the university. That was not in the cards at the beginning. It was not, we didn't expect that we would be able to use the biogas coming off of farms that way. I need some water. Sorry. So what happened was, I want to point out 2007 I want to point out 2011, and then I want to highlight 2013. In 2007, the university makes a commitment to being climate neutral. It understands that it can't get there on its own. It's going to need to look elsewhere for these offsets. At the same time, we were in a state in 2007 that passed the only renewable energy portfolio standard in the Southeast and the only renewable energy portfolio standard that has set-asides for animal waste. We have a set-aside for swine waste, and we have a set-aside for poultry waste, which makes it something that was necessary for the utilities to get renewable energy from. And in addition to that, we had something called the Swine Farm Environmental Performance Standards Act, which was intended to help put farms on a path to cleaner waste management. And so once that was passed, and marrying that with the university's commitment, one of the options that came out of that seemed like a good idea was to actually test these policies and marry them. And that's what happened in 2011 when we started when the Lloyd Ray Farms project went operational. So the point of that was to prove the concept that you could get carbon offsets, produce renewable energy, and in the case of the Lloyd Ray Farms, we were able to use the program under the Swine Farm Environmental Performance Standards Act to be able to put an innovative system on that farm. So we were able to do research, and we were able to do proof of concept, and then we did that with Duke Energy. I know someone's here from Duke Energy, and Google ended up coming in on that with us as well. That really was kind of kicked off waste to energy in the state. And then from that, we were considering how do we scale up from there. That was one farm. It was a fraction of the offsets we needed. It was a fraction of the renewable energy certificates that the utility needed. And so we then took that knowledge and did an analysis in 2013 that I would consider the roadmap for making energy from swine waste in the state. It was done to help Duke Energy figure out how to meet its renewable energy portfolio standard. And that's what we've been using. And and the reason that we can do that, sorry, I skipped over 2012 because I was trying to be efficient, is in 2012, we had a policy change in the state that allowed for directed biogas to give utilities credit for putting biogas into the pipeline and directing it to a certain plant, which is far more efficient than what we were doing. We were making electricity on a farm in North Carolina. I'm going to show you the farm. So how it works. What happens is you've got, on a farm, you've got an anaerobic digester. That anaerobic digester produces biogas. The biogas is captured, and then it is collected, sent to essentially a mini refinery, and injected into a pipeline, and then that pipeline carries it to Durham, North Carolina. That's the theory of directed biogas. We were thinking back in 2013 or so, this was something that the utilities would take advantage of, and that we would continue to pursue carbon offsets alongside utilities. Fast forward to 2017, 2018, and the idea of a combined heat and power plant and how to run that with renewables. That opened a pathway to the university to realize that not only could we make power much more efficiently, but we could power it on a renewable. And that is what has set us on the path to pursuing biogas at such a large scale. So now we've gone from looking at, or what we've done is gone from looking at just carbon offsets to carbon offsets and biogas to operate the university, which would put us in a position where we would be a carbon sink as opposed to a source of carbon. So does everybody understand what I mean by that, by carbon sink? Do you give me a chance to take a drink. That means we would be responsible for so many reductions, we would have extra reductions. We would overachieve our emission reduction goal. And so if we were to power our entire campus on biogas, that would put us in the black. And we would actually, potentially we could retire more, which would be a very good thing, retire more greenhouse gas emissions. Or we could help others achieve their emission reductions. That's not what we've been contemplating, but that is something that someone might do with extra carbon. I also thought I would show you why North Carolina is so very important in the national scheme of things. We are the third largest area in the nation for biomethane production. All of that is greatly concentrated in eastern North Carolina. And we have right now about 5, maybe to 20 farms that have anaerobic digesters on them. So that gives you an idea of how much more needs to be captured. The other thing I'd like to point out is the co-benefits of doing anaerobic digestion, which would be a considerable reduction in odors, as well as addressing pathogens. And then I like to consider it or think about it as a major step forward to further waste management on farms. And then what we've also seen in North Carolina, despite an REPS that has been in place since 2007, the utilities have not met it to date in the last 10, 11 years. I mean, I'm very happy to see in the last few months a few projects in the pipeline, sorry for the pun, but there's much more that the utility needs to be doing. Our demand signal that we would send out would be nearly equal to what the REPS would require of the utilities. That amount of methane is about 3% of the total demand in the state for natural gas. It may seem small, but it would make an extremely big difference in rural North Carolina. It would stop methane from going up in the atmosphere, which is happening right now unmitigated. And it would open the door to further opportunities with respect to capturing methane coming off of other waste sources. So, for instance, we have a very large poultry industry in the state. There's municipal wastewater treatment plants. All of these things could become options as we start to build the infrastructure. And the point of what we're doing is to create that demand signal, meet our reduction needs, and help the state at the same time. And so that's part of this big picture, and I guess a big part of the punchline is that we have this opportunity here in North Carolina, and it would be, considering the need to do something about climate, this is an opportunity to address these methane emissions from a sector that is not usually motivated to do so. So now, I probably went over time, but do I take questions now?
So a lot to digest. I did give the first question already away, so we'll hit you next. We also have a couple submitted here in advance that I'd like to get to as well. So,
Anwar Ha'odum, a sophomore public policy major. So I guess large-scale sustainability efforts like the proposed biogas power plant has community-wide implications. Why is the subcommittee only comprised of faculty and students?
Who takes that?
You mean the original subcommittee looking at the questions last year?
The subcommittee that still exists, that's gonna, I guess, iron out the policy.
Oh, in terms of the law, what I believe Tallman said earlier, that in terms of a large-scale energy policy for the university that we're going to work on over the fall, I think there's going to be, it's going to run through the campus sustainability committee, but there's going to be a robust amount of engagement in the community and stakeholders about the design of that program. I don't think we've designed that yet, but I know from conversations that that's a process that we want to be very open and transparent about. I'm personally, speaking for myself, advocating an approach where we really do take comment from all interested parties as we consider how to design that policy for the university.
Also, are the slides going to be available somewhere?
Yes, we can make those available on the sustainability website. We had a question submitted in advance. Tanya, I think would be good to hit as well. This comes from our former dean of the Nicholas School, Bill Schlesinger. Will the biogas be piped to the campus, or will it be used in place of natural gas at a facility, the fossil fuel natural gas, at a facility closer to the biogas collection site?
There it is. What happens is the biogas gets injected into the pipeline and it finds its way to the campus, and what we have to do is make arrangements with the pipeline carriers to move that gas to Durham. Now, the way I like to think about how the biogas moves, it moves like any energy or fuel moves. Say if you do a solar array, you got to interconnect and you put that electron on the grid, and that electron finds its way to the end user. That's the same case with the biogas. Now, and what happens with that biogas is it gets cleaned and refined, and it's basically fungible with regular conventional natural gas, which is the beauty of biogas, is that it's something that can be used in the place of natural gas, used just like natural gas, and provide 24/7, a 24/7 renewable. I always enjoyed talking to my gas friends when I was not really thinking about biogas as a fuel source, but thinking about ways that we could pair it with other renewables and have a total 24/7 system. It was kind of a side dream, and now it's something that Duke University can do. I think what tends to get people caught up or caught up on is that specific molecule very likely may not make it to the university. It's not like we have a tracker on it. It's not like it's the underage airline system, for minors. You don't have someone who's chaperoning the little molecule through the pipeline. It goes off, it mixes with everything else, just like mixing in your blood, a blood cell mixing in your bloodstream, and they go off in different directions. But what we do is we deposit a certain amount of biogas, and then we withdraw the same amount in Durham, and that's really the crux of it. The other thing I can't help but say is that I would like to make the point that expecting a renewable to have its own infrastructure to move from place to place is actually really hurting renewables. When someone says, how do you know that molecule is going to get there, or it's just being sent somewhere else, that's really how we do energy. And if there's an expectation that renewables have to have their own infrastructure, they're going to be even more hamstrung than they already are. So I feel pretty passionately that we need to be making room for renewables on our existing infrastructure, and this is one way to do it.
I forgot to ask, is Bill Schlesinger here? Thank you.
I would have noticed.
Hi, my name is Trisha Dobnak. I'm currently a fourth-year PhD student in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department. I'm actually one of Mark DeSouza's students. He couldn't be here tonight, but these pictures are all very familiar. This is also a topic that's very near and dear to me because my thesis is actually how we can use biological approaches in an engineered system to upgrade raw biogas, which, as you know, is only 60% methane. How can we upgrade it to 95% methane? So when you're talking about the bioprocessing, I'm just curious. Well, my first question is if you've considered CNG over existing pipelines, and if so, what was the deciding factor to use the existing pipelines over CNG?
Yep. Thanks for your question. So the short answer is that I don't think CNG would be out of the question. I would say that at a high level, the economics of CNG make it less attractive than other transport methods. Some of that has to do with the amount of energy that it consumes in the compression process, as well as the upgrading that's required before you get it to that stage. But I wouldn't say that it's off the table long term.
So with regards to upgrading, if you're going to use existing pipeline networks, you do have to upgrade it to natural gas quality standards. And I'm curious what sweetening approach is currently being pursued, or if there's multiple options that are being considered to get it to those standards.
Yeah. So it will be different per pipeline carrier. So per interconnection process, the local distribution companies in North Carolina are allowed to set the standards as are required to be approved by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. However, for other markets, if you were to do, say, overland transport of CNG or LNG, the off-taking customer might have a different standard, right? So if you're talking about pipeline injection, it's usually removal of the nitrogen, removal of the water. I'm not an expert in the chemistry and physical removal of that.
So sulfide as well, because that's corrosive.
You're correct. Yep. So it has to be safe for existing pipelines. If you'd like to follow with me after this discussion, I'm glad to put you in touch with some of the folks that are actually fabricating and installing the equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Question here?
Hi, I'm Madeline Parker. I'm both a community member and I work at NC Warren. I have two quick questions. One is about, I know you mentioned that this process would create both a reduction in the smell and in the carcinogens, pathogens. But yeah, given the devastating circumstances over there with the way that they spray the hog waste all over the community and it is making people sick and a really inhospitable environment, are there studies that actually link to show how much it would reduce it? And if so, would those be things that you could make available or?
I'm looking at the professor, I think, from the law school, only because of the teaching point she made and the research. Like, this is the value of us doing it as well, which I think I glossed over, is that there's a lot for us to learn from doing this kind of work, and it really deserves leadership. I think another thing I glossed over is this has been an issue in North Carolina for 30 years or so, and it's not been solved. And one of the reasons I was really excited to work at Duke and come back in 2007, 2008 to start the Carbon Offsets Initiative, that's what I was responsible for then, and our first project was the Lloyd Ray Farms project, was to be able to make progress on these very things, because there have been very few institutions with kind of a long-term stamina for working with hog farms, trying to deal with the waste. And that, I think, is going to be part of the body of work that is done. I mean, the PhD student has, oh, there she is. She's testament to that as well. These are the kinds of things that we're evaluating with Lloyd Ray Farms, for instance. That's an innovative system. We'll be able to compare that with an anaerobic digestion system. So that kind of evidence is going to be building.
Yeah, and the follow-up question was, So if this comes forward and it's successful, do you think that it would increase demand for, so we already have, it's something like 10 million hogs in North Carolina, which is like not very sustainable, and they're kept in really terrible conditions. And my concern with this plan, or one of them, is that it would actually increase the demand for like more hogs, to be providing more waste. And like, this does come from, you know, the fact that I'm like, I'm a vegan and I'm into animal rights activism, but also just from the environmental standpoint, would it be likely to increase a demand in hog waste itself?
No, I mean, what farmers would be making off of biogas, this is not a very big money making endeavor. You know, they're still this is an opportunity for them to do something with the waste. And I hope it's an opportunity to show the ag community that there are very good reasons for mitigating carbon dioxide emissions, which that's another thing I didn't mention, is that sector doesn't have a lot of signals and hasn't had really the, you know, interest in pursuing greenhouse gas emission reductions and doing things for climate change. We really need to, you know, make climate change and mitigation and adaptation something that everybody is involved in. I think that's also a really important thing that we're doing by paying attention to biogas, is because we are working with the ag community and we're trying to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and show that it's worthwhile to do. Now, to pivot back to your original question, that's not enough to motivate a farmer to go out and get more pigs. I also think that, or I know that we have laws in the state that would not allow that to happen unless that farm put an innovative system on the farm. You can't expand without one. That's another, you know, additional proposition. I hope we're in a position soon for that to be something that is an option for farmers and an affordable option. I see an anaerobic digester as a major down payment towards that. But it's really, I don't see it motivating people to go out and say, I'm going to make a lot of money out of biogas because by creating more waste, by having more pigs. Like it's just not the way the business works.
Son, you mentioned chickens being a potential source of methane. Are there other potential sources of methane beyond swine farms?
Well, so we're the second largest pork producer in the nation, and we are the third largest poultry producer, which I shouldn't say never, I know it now, but it wasn't something that occurred to me when I first moved to North Carolina. And there's an opportunity to use the dry litter from that and combine it with like food waste. And so they've got these mixed digesters that are already being used. And then you've got municipal wastewater treatment plants. You have landfills. I skipped over landfills, but that's another opportunity. A lot of these are doing kind of individual power projects. So like Lloyd Ray was self-contained. We had a microturbine on the farm. In this case, what we're trying to do is scale up by using the fuel and move it and make electricity or power more efficiently. But yeah, there's a lot of other things that could then come to the market once the infrastructure and kind of market signal is there for it.
I want to be mindful of time. We've got one question here, and it looks like we've got a few more. So if we could get maybe 3 questions, I want to make sure we get Tim in as well.
Hey, yeah, thanks everyone. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm a third-year student studying public policy. Regarding your question, I guess there's been a moratorium on hog farming since 1999, so again, I wouldn't expect that to increase the number of hogs with anaerobic digesters. My question to you all is, if this is going to be the punchline, and Tim, you may address this further, then can you give some numbers on the technical and economic feasibility of this in terms of how many anaerobic digesters we'd be looking at, what scale they would be, the price of them, and then how that would translate to kilowatt per hour pricing?
Can I talk to you after this? Because that's a lot to go through here.
Or just a,
I mean,
a general, like, how do we know this is feasible if this is going to be the punchline? I just want some basic numbers.
Yep. So I'll let Tanya elaborate here. I guess I would say two things. One, to think about this in terms of kilowatt hours is not what we're pursuing, right? So we're, as we've noted early on this evening, we're no longer talking about producing electricity with this, right? So our commitment, and just to be very clear for this, our commitment is very separate from what would be required by Duke Energy or any other utility. In fact, one of the major motivating factors for us pursuing biogas is that this is additional to anything else that be required under other state laws. And then in terms of our just sort of just our fuel consumption, you know, if you were to say, and I think Tim's going to show a slide on this, our annual fuel needs could be met by just a handful of farms with digestion capabilities. And it would greatly depend on the size of the farm, but like Tanya said, we can talk certainly exacting numbers afterwards.
Great, thank you.
So I'm Jeff Vinson, the current dean of the Nicholas School of the Environment. Sorry.
I promised you'll.
After you.
She's been waiting for. Thanks, Jeff.
My name is Alana Carter, and I live in Bladen County, and also with North Carolina Environmental Justice Network. I'm one of 3 main counties that Tanya talked about that's in North Carolina. Bladen County, Sampson County, and Duplin County have all the hogs. All the hogs. Lloyd Ray Farms, he has a little farm. You know, and I was surprised that, excuse me, that they went to that farm first. And I found out later it was just a closer model. Duke was already associated with them and whatnot. I find out now that they actually are moving on down the line down that way, but they're not there yet. But the waste is too much. This covered anaerobic digester, most of ours are not covered. So I think if anybody would even start covering those doggone lagoons, it might help something. I know it reduced the odor, but there's so much more to this than what meets the eye. I agree with the young lady who was here earlier about maybe more hog productions have come about it. Not no more hog farms, but it's already like 1,000 in one little unit. And when you're talking about getting rid of the waste, it just doesn't seem feasible to me. I don't see it. I heard about it before. I actually went to Lloyd Ray Farms and saw it for myself, so I know it's a small place and it's a small digester, but I just wonder why it hasn't come to where the real problem is.
You mean why it hasn't come to Duplin, Sampson, Bladen counties?
Yeah, why hasn't it?
Well, that's where we're.
I mean, I don't know if we even want it. I'm just saying we need a solution to what's going on because we're getting sick there and everything. So, you know, it's easy to say when you're here and you don't really see or smell it. I really wonder what waste is going to do in your pipeline. I just wonder what is waste going to do.
Well, the waste actually doesn't go in. The waste itself doesn't go in the pipeline. It's the gas that is moved. So there's no liquid waste that's getting moved. So all that's up in that is gas.
Though.
Pardon me?
It would be the gas off the waste.
But the gas is cleaned and scrubbed. We can't put it into a pipeline unless it meets pipeline quality, which removes everything that's not natural gas, basically, from it. Your point about going to those counties, that's exactly where these systems need to go. Lloyd Ray is a complete anomaly in that it's the only hog farm in all of Yadkin County. That was not where, my choice would not have been going to Lloyd Ray. I'm very glad the farmer did it. It's been a great project. It was, at the time, Progress Energy and Duke Energy were not merged. And so Duke Energy, we had to find a Duke Energy farm because we partnered with Duke Energy in order for Duke Energy to take the renewable energy certificates, which pushed us up into Yadkin County. And the irony is that it's not even a Duke Energy farm. Sorry to say this if anybody from Duke Energy is here, but they didn't realize until after we were far into the project that it was a service by Surrey Yadkin Electric Co-op. but that's a learning experience. So anyway, you're absolutely right. That's where it needs to go. That's why we did the study in 2013. And we thought, you know, we've got a directed biogas ruling, which might help us scale. And from my point of view, thinking about doing carbon offsets and meeting our goals, I wanted to have a plan because what was happening was very serendipitous. It was about like a certain farmer was interested in doing something and you were kind of popping all over the state based on who was willing to do a project. And I think we need to be very intentional about it, and we need to be going to the counties where you're talking about. Like I said, I think Duke University is doing this because it cares about this issue and it wants to make a difference. And this is a tangible, big first step. And I hope what it does is leverages other involvement so that we can carry forward and add other pollution controls and do other things that improve what's going on.
So out of respect for everyone's time, if we could, Jeffrey, if you could hear from you, and then let's move on to Tim, and then we will take questions at the end after Tim finishes.
Okay. Jeff Vincent, Dean of the Nicholas School. So all my work is international in developing countries, and I just want to put out there a bit of a global perspective of why I get excited about this, why I think it's important. And so I work mostly in Asia. This is the most populous region of the world. It's the economically fastest growing, lots of population. And what's coming with that growing population and growing income levels is more and more demand for animal products. And so an earlier speaker mentioned that she was vegan. I try to be vegan. I'm not pure, but I try. And you know, I would like to see humans eating fewer animals, but I just don't see that happening. And so I get excited about this because I think there's an opportunity for Duke to provide global leadership on a huge problem. You know, look at the IPCC report. Methane emissions from livestock operations are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And so I see the prospect here for Duke to make progress on an issue that matters a lot to our state and is affecting our people, but also can have a bigger impact around the world. A comment was made earlier about the need for research on this, and I agree. I think there's the potential to deal with a host of other environmental problems if you can cap these lagoons, but we want to do the research on that and see, you know, just how significant those reductions are. Last comment about is biogas feasible? Look, this isn't new. I've worked a lot in Malaysia. In the 1980s already, there were biogas digesters going in that country. That's a developing country. Now, it's waste from a different agricultural source. Germany has like 9,000 biogas-fired power plants. Now, you know, again, different sources of waste, you know, agricultural still, but, you know, some different, not these big lagoons so much. But there's a lot of experience with this technology around the world. And I think it's been held up in the U.S. for a variety of reasons, but I think Duke is in a great position to get this moving. And we're in a state where, as was indicated, there's a lot of potential. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for Duke to provide leadership on a really, you know, globally important issue. So not a question, but really more of a comment. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Tim?
Never go last. I'm not quite sure what's left for me to say between the questions and my colleagues, but let me try and bring us back to the big picture of the Climate Action Plan and then sort of Duke's role and desire for climate leadership and how all of what we talked about, not just about biogas today, is sort of the portfolio of actions I think has the university positioned and having ambition to provide that leadership. In terms of the Climate Action Plan, I just put up a slide here of the emissions trajectory of the university since we've enacted the plan. And as you see, and as Tavy said, we made some significant progress, but we kind of harvested the low-hanging fruit. We've taken the energy efficiency gains. We've gotten off coal. We've banged our head against the transportation challenge in 7 different ways. I have a bloody forehead for it, but we're still going to try numbers 8, 9, 10. But I think if there's 2 pockets of emissions that this university really can't do anything about as long as we're going to do the counting the way we're doing. The transportation emissions of our employees, staff, faculty, students flying around the country, as long as we're accounting for them and as long as we're using jet fuel, are going to be significant. And the emissions embedded in the electricity that we use here from Duke Energy, as long as the state is regulated as it is, are going to be significant, because we're not able to really, and 589 has some promise, but we're not there yet, be able to get, we have to accept the carbon footprint of the utility. So how do we get to zero by 2024? This is where, the punchline comes in. We can look at, and we will look at significant investments in solar and energy efficiency and things like that, but that will be incremental progress chopping down this block. With biogas, because biogas gives you a double dividend, that's been mentioned here, because biogas both stops the usage of the fossil fuel and fossil methane that contributes to greenhouse gases using renewable fuel, and because it just takes methane, which is a 34-to-1 warming factor over CO2, and makes it into CO2. So you get, every time you burn a molecule of methane, you get a 34 times benefit in terms of warming potential in the atmosphere. You get a major reduction in greenhouse gas warming potential of what's going on in the Operation University when you burn that biogas. So this is one scenario, not one that just to illustrate the sort of the polar case. If this university went 100% biogas, we would be able to over-comply. We would get, because of that 34-to-1 factor, we would actually reduce the global warming potential of the atmosphere by operating this university. That's the only way. And the numbers are, if we just put 10% into our system, we would pretty much neutralize our natural gas emissions for the university. If we put 30% in biogas into our system, we would make this university neutral by 2024. So if we got 30% of the natural gas coming to this campus to be biologically sourced by 2024, this campus will meet its neutrality goal of by 2024. And then if we continue to find a way to build this renewable natural gas market and be able to afford to access it, and did 100% biogas for this campus, we would be actually a negative 700,000 or so tons per year campus. So again, by operating this campus, we would actually be benefiting the environment. That's the scale of the opportunity in biogas as compared to these other investments which we will make and want to make, but seem to chop off the emissions stack and don't get us anywhere close to below the line. A couple other things I want to say, and sort of thinking about the leadership here, and they've come up in the questions. The university can lead by not just focusing on the emissions, but focusing on things that will catalyze change outside the university. It's a lot of what Jeff just said here, but in 2050, we have to get, to meet the greenhouse gas goals of the UN to like 80% reduction. That requires a huge build out in bioenergy, both in this country and elsewhere. By stimulating activities that could show that the achievability of those markets, we might be able to help with a global scale of change. We can help on electrification. As mentioned, electrification of buses. My institute, other places at Duke are looking at how do you deploy electricity infrastructure across the country in a way that can scale that change in a much greater degree than just Duke can do itself. So we should be looking for places to invest where there's a scale of change. One other example is thinking about looking at how our power is generated in this country and the competition that would benefit renewables, and whether we can change the way we run our power sector so that somebody like Duke University can say, yes, we do want 100% solar power and we have a right to buy it in some way. Forcing that kind of change doesn't just help Duke University. Forcing that kind of change helps everybody. I also want to think about how else do we do this. We actually are generating leaders of the world on this campus, and we need to make sure we educate them as we explore this. And Jennifer's comments were perfect. I've run 2 BAS Connections classes, one on how to do a carbon pricing regime on the campus, one on how to do a solarized program for Duke employees. But we should be using those devices, the Data Plus program, the master's projects of all our students to really dig in on these very impactful questions. Finally, there was questions about the community members. I want to go to the community members in two ways. first, somebody asked how can the community help us create change? One of the things I would say is help us change those policies that prevent us from bringing power to our campus in a clean way. You know, we talked about HR 589, the gentleman from the Sierra Club brought it up. Those sorts of policies, if you have a willing actor, a willing actor, and they can work within the regulatory system to buy more renewables, help us as public voices that want it. The other thing I want to just talk to, and I see the woman from Bladen County is leaving, but I think we really do, and I want to stress this, want to engage as we look at the biogas project in the community. I think the problem she described in those 3 counties on the coastal plain is real, and if you've ever been down there, it is noxious, and those people deserve a solution. We are not able to solve the entire thing, but she's right. Odor control improves with digesters. Pathogen control improves with digesters. It moves it in the right direction, and we are working very hard as a university to try and engage all the stakeholders, public, private sector, to come in and bring more solutions. Some of this is more than maybe we can do to get a 100% solution, but if we get 75% there, and we're a really good and willing actor trying to get the other 25% to come, I think that's a movement in a positive direction on a 3-decade-long problem that hasn't found a solution yet. So that's some wrap-up comments from me. I know we're just about at time, but if you want, I'll linger if you want a question or 2 more. Thank you.
So we've got a few people lined up. I want to be respectful of others' time as well. We are at 7:30, so if you need to leave, we respect that. I will say also, if we can go to the next slide, we will have an open comment forum on the sustainability website. So if there are thoughts, questions that you did not have a chance to ask or express, you can do so now on the sustainability website. There's a form there for you. We are here not just to talk, but to listen. And so if you need to leave, we appreciate that. But we'd like to entertain a few more questions if we could.
So I really appreciate that the idea of stakeholders was brought up there at the end. And given that these biogas projects are going to be on a larger scale than Lloyd Ray Farms, and that some environmental justice communities and organizations have concerns, how is the university planning on engaging with those groups and communities? And is that going to be done before contracts are signed or afterwards?
It's ongoing. I mean, we've been talking with you at Duke Climate Coalition, in impromptu, informal, and formally as well. You're an internal stakeholder group with respect to communities outside. I've been speaking with folks since last summer. Was at a strategy session in Whitakers, North Carolina in December. Have been speaking with ECU to bring ECU into the fold in terms of helping to communicate with communities and get feedback and be a local entity that's working with communities and able to bring stakeholders together without having an agenda. I mean, so that's ECU we just talked today and is planning on doing a discussion series in the next 2 months and is in the process of reaching out to stakeholders. And I will make every effort to help them reach out to stakeholders. I'm having conversations with NC Conservation Net, which is in touch with community groups. We speak with folks in the government and make them aware of the need to do outreach and support us in our need for outreach. So, and lastly, I'll say, and I don't know if she's still here, but we are building a faculty advisory team to help us with community engagement and to basically advise us on it and help us understand not just, to supplement our process, and I think as well for some policy recommendations. I know I'm pretty steeped in the policies that I see that need to happen, but what policies that they would see that would be helpful that we might help to encourage or study or evaluate that would benefit communities. So all those things are happening.
Okay, thank you.
Hello again. So I think I'm missing one part of this equation. So we are talking about having this biogas power plant on campus here. No, we're no longer talking about that at all. Okay, so where is the power plant going to be?
Let me give it a shot. This conversation has been linked with the idea of building a combined heat and power plant on campus. That concept has been, I think, put aside indefinitely or paused indefinitely. There still are 2 other steam plants on this plant who are producing, the biogas is necessary, or the natural gas is necessary to produce steam for the 49 or 51% of thermal energy need the campus has. And so we have 2 big steam plants already running. So right now the proposal is we're going to acquire biogas, and we're going to, if we decide to just continue to use the steam plants, it'll be combusted in the current steam plants.
So it's a substitution.
Yes.
Okay. Unrelated to biogas, have we looked into using any sort of grid energy storage options, or is that something that we have control over?
That's a very good question. As it so happens, yes, we have looked at that. Grid energy storage, in and of itself, doesn't really help us address our climate problems.
Right.
There are reasons that you might integrate energy storage technologies, and that could be some sort of flow battery or lithium-ion battery, but that in and of itself doesn't help us. What is often the reason this often comes up in conversations about renewable energy and greenhouse gas reductions, as I think you're alluding to, is that, you know, what could Duke University couple solar PV with energy storage, right? So the short answer is that there's for any amount of PV that we could put on this campus, any amount of solar photovoltaic electrical generation that we could put on this campus, at any hour of the year, we could consume 100% of that.
Right.
So there would be no need to store it.
That's fine. So are the steam plants being used continuously as it stands now? 100%
So
of the time.
another, I guess, technical clarification: the steam plants do not make electricity.
Right.
So we pipe that heat, you know, around campus, and yes, they do operate year round. Okay. There's obviously a differential in the amount of heat that's needed on campus between summer and winter, but yes, it's year round.
Thank you.
Hi, Steve Wang, Earth and Ocean Sciences. I have a comment and then a question. First, my one comment is and to try and encourage the adoption of responsible implementation on sort of a broader front. So we've talked about odor pathogen reduction, carbon forcing reduction, which is all great. But of course, issues that have come up in sort of the conversation have related to such diverse things as conditions of labor for people who work in feedlots, nutrient runoff from those lagoons. Obviously, you're capturing the waste, but there's nutrient pollution to consider as well. And so my comment is just a general encouragement of the consideration of how biogas would affect all the consequences of pig feedlot operations, not just sort of those that relate directly to global warming potential and greenhouse gas emissions. And then my question, which is also kind of related to a comment, is also wants to encourage responsible carbon accounting. So as far as looking at that projection for how we can meet our climate action plan goals, there are obviously some assumptions that have to be made. I'm a marine biogeochemist. I convert between elements and between molecular ratios all the time. So that calculation obviously would have a large influence on how the carbon translates to methane and vice versa. I'm not an atmospheric chemist. You may want to ask people in Drew Shindell's group in the Division of Earth and Ocean Sciences. Obviously, methane has different timescales than CO2 as far as lifetime in the atmosphere. Its chemistry may be dependent on seasonal factors, environmental factors, atmospheric chemistry, and so we want to just be sure that we're actually getting the carbon reduction potential that we. Can
I speak to both your comments?
Yeah.
First, on the first comment, yes. When we talk about engaging community, trying to find, other partners, trying to be a positive change in these farms, it's not just for the greenhouse gas pollution off those farms. It's for the other pollution sources and the like. And that's why we're, And I think that the university as an actor in that capacity is better than some of the other people who might be purchasing this gas and sort of trying to force that change. But we are very aware of those issues and very much trying. In fact, one outreach effort, but Roxandra's here. We have a class with the Keenan Ethics Institute now looking at exactly these questions and with the communities and the trade-offs. So we're trying to take a very hard look and be very transparent and honest about it. On the other, the 34-to-1, 25-to-1 ratio, Drew Schindel and Prasad Butler are both on the subcommittee where we sort of assess this. Drew is Drew is a fervent advocate of reducing as much methane as possible, as soon as possible, because of if you do the counting differently with the time scales, the methane actually becomes even more powerful as greenhouse gas. So the numbers we're using are actually conservative in terms of greenhouse gas benefit. If we used the ones that do less of long-term accounting and give more credit for the short-term reduction potential in methane, we would actually get up in the 7 to 80 to 1 range, and then those numbers, that trough that we could achieve is deeper, and et cetera. So we're aware of that. We're taking a hard look at it. We're consulting with Drew and other atmospheric chemists at the Nicholas School, and I feel pretty comfortable that we're getting the benefits we think.
That's good to hear. I guess one final comment on the carbon accounting is also, just making sure you guys have done my homework. My advisor gets on my butt all the time about sort of these calculations, but also making sure that you take the carbon costs of biogas refinement or something into account as well.
It's all built into it. Plus, the carbon protocols we follow are very stringent. So,
I think in the past we used a protocol from the Climate Action Reserve, which is an organization out of California that creates protocols for the accounting of projects like this, on which I serve on the board, and I've worked on the protocols with them. I feel pretty. If that's the one we're going to use again, I feel pretty comfortable on that one as well. Yeah,
I guess in that case, then another comment might be transparency with these calculations would probably be really educational and also really enlightening.
Mm-hmm. We can put the protocol up on the website so you can test them as well.
But also, I think back to Jennifer's point, I think we can try and engage the educational mission of the university as much as we can in this process by being transparent about it, by helping people be Socratic with it. I don't find any reason not to be exactly what you're asking for.
We're happy to share the greenhouse gas accounting methodology and the numbers we're using. We work with students and faculty every day that look at those numbers and different aspects. So happy to share those as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have one more question, and then we'll break for this evening. But as I mentioned, we are open to hearing more from you. There will be the feedback form on the website.
So largely commend the vision, and I'm really excited about see what happens in the coming years. But as we know, the devil's in the details. So it's taken us this long to come taken us this far to come this long. Yep, screwed it up again.
I know what you mean.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So what is Duke actually going to be doing on the ground to accelerate this effort? Are there going to be financial resources to developers? Are there going to be technical support? Is it just going to be a purchase commitment? How do we get that to the next level to really accelerate it? Because
I don't know what my colleagues feel qualified to say. I think I'm gonna first I was gonna make a joke and say there's a hat back they'll be passed. No, I'm kidding.
Your tuition's going up.
No, neither of those are true. For the video. We actually have maturing conversations with potential sources of this. I know enough to be dangerous, so but I think it is very promising that we'll be able to put forth the vision we're talking about here. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's a couple of ways in which I think the university is making this happen. One is the technical commitment that was proved out with Lloyd Ray Farms and the actual digestion technology and support of the players that are making that happen is ongoing. There's also several other universities in North Carolina, NC State and East Carolina, namely, that are working on this problem. But the energy marketing, the awareness of pipeline utilities of how to move this is ever developing. And the university has been working on this. I've been working on this. Tanya's been working on this. And so, yes, I think we are providing our resources where we best can. Sometimes that is direct, and sometimes that is with financial support, and sometimes that is with, as several people have noted, and as I'm excited to see develop, research opportunities for the university community.
Yeah, and I'll just say, in all seriousness, we have been having very serious discussions with those that can supply biogas to us, and understanding that probably the best thing we can immediately do is make a big purchase, because that sends a big signal to the marketplace, and that starts to drive costs down. And the sooner we start to do it, the sooner that costs go down, and the larger you scale, that's got benefits. The other place that we're looking, is on the affordability side, and to improve affordability. And some of that has to do with, some costs that are from the regulated entities we have to work with. So there's things that we've been involved with, for instance, like we intervened in the pipeline injection docket with the Utilities Commission to be able to see if we could influence the standards based on the research we've been doing. And I mean influence in terms of having a fair standard that wouldn't, hurt biogas as compared to natural gas, because it's at a disadvantage. Because what the utilities do and the natural gas company does is says, we've never handled this before, so they put a lot more conditions on it. Well, we've done we have a farm operating where we're able to test the gas coming out of a digester and say, the constituents you want to test for aren't even in our gas. So those are the kinds of things that we're able to do that then not only helps us with being able to afford it, but helps everybody else in terms of being able to get it into the pipeline, and also overall helping with affordability. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing immediately, and it's a kind of a several front kind of effort. So we're working on the policy side, we're working on technology, we're working on financial signals. At some point, I hope that we're going to be talking about cost share and other things, and some other things that other renewables might enjoy, or other ag practices enjoy. So those are all, part of the toolbox.
On behalf of the panelists and Dr. Trask, I would just like to say thank you for your attendance tonight, but more for your participation. This is an active conversation that will be ongoing, as Dr. Trask and Tim both mentioned. So we will be back again in the future, but we appreciate your attendance tonight and your sharing of your questions and your feedback. Thank you very much.